Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Content Patch for the 14th of June 2013. My name is TotalBiscuit with today's gaming news and comment. Coming up in the show, Xbox One's initial release will be restricted to 21 countries. We'll tell you which countries will be buying a PS4 a little bit later on in the show. DICE confirms that veteran developers are involved in the new Star Wars Battlefront title. Sony explains the reason you'll have to pay for online gaming with the PlayStation 4. PlayStation Plus will not be required for free-to-play games, and Nvidia says that Xbox One and PlayStation 4 are great news for gaming PCs. All this in the OC Remix track of the day is coming your way right about now. Microsoft seems to be trying to dig itself into the biggest PR hole possible after it was widely regarded that the Xbox One lost E3 versus the PlayStation 4's conference. Now it has been announced that the Xbox One will only be available inside 21 countries, and more to the point, it will not work outside of any of the listed 21 in question. This is because of the Xbox Live requirement for the Xbox One, and as a direct result, the Xbox One will essentially be region-locked on release, and importing a console simply will not work. The list of countries supported on launch will be Australia, Austria, Belgium, Brazil, Canada, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, Ireland, Italy, Mexico, Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, Russia, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, the UK, and the United States. Now, if you would like to know who's missing from that, here is an image that shows my top 25 video demographics. These are the 25 countries in which my videos are most watched. I've put a tick next to the ones that will be able to use the Xbox One and a cross next to the ones that will not. This indicates that amongst my top 25 most watched demographics, which would indicate that these guys have a fair number of gamers in their country if they're regularly watching a gaming channel, 8 out of those 25 countries will not, in fact, support the Xbox One. The two biggest and most prominent, in my honest opinion, sorry Portugal, would be Poland and Romania. Now, I say Romania because I know for a fact that there's a huge video gaming demographic in Romania, and I have a particular fondness for the country because that's where my PR guy Chris lives. Poland, that would be the country where The Witcher 3, one of the games shown at the Microsoft conference, is being developed. So not only is it not available in that country, but the people that made one of the titles which was showcased in the conference won't be able to play their own game on the system they advertised it on. Because right now Sony seems to be able to do no wrong, they also announced that their system would in fact be region-free across the board. Admittedly, there were also promises around the PS3 era that would happen, including the notion of Blu-rays being region-free, which, as it turns out, did not in fact occur, so just bear that in mind. But this is undeniably ridiculous. I mean, it's just adding to a gigantic pile of terrible things that Microsoft has announced. And a couple of days ago, we had Microsoft's Don Mattrick, who spent a lot of time on stage during the Xbox One conference, say that, yes, they actually do have a product for those who aren't able to get some form of connectivity. It's called the Xbox 360. If you have zero access to the internet, that is an offline device. He went on to say, seriously, when I read the blogs and thought about who really was the most impacted, there was a person that said, hey, I'm on a nuclear sub, and I don't even know what it means to be on a nuclear sub, but I've got to imagine it's not easy to get an internet connection. But hey, I can empathize. If I was on a sub, I'd be disappointed. It's a service-based world. If you think about things and how they get better with an internet connection, that's a design choice we've made, I think, that people can appreciate. We did a lot of testing, a lot of consumer research, and I think we made a good choice. Mattrick also said that he believed that gamers were imagining outcomes that are worse than what we believe it's going to be like in the real world. Oh my god! Guys! Like, I am terrible when it comes to PR, I've got to say, but please replace Don Mattrick with me, because I would do a way better job of not pissing everybody off. And that's surprising, because I'm extremely good at pissing people off. I would actually say it's one of my most well-developed character traits. For the love of God, do not treat gamers like idiots. Yes, a lot of them are. Lots of gamers are idiots. The problem is, the smart guys, oh, they will go after you if they are treated that way. And those are the guys you need to worry about. The smart guys, especially the guys with money or influence. Those are the guys you need to be concerned with. You bring up things like the nuclear sub. and saying, right, well, it's just this guy said he was on nuclear sub. There can't be that many people. It's not about that many people who are on nuclear submarines. This is what Microsoft doesn't seem to get. Along with this region announcement, not only are they excluding large numbers of small groups, but they're also excluding massive countries. Massive countries. You're excluding places like Portugal, Singapore. Singapore! This is the country that has a household broadband penetration rate of 104.2%. As in, there are more internet connections in Singapore than there are houses. The connectivity rate in Singapore is 99%. And you're ignoring them. Ignoring Poland, of course, which has a massive gaming culture and the home of CD Projekt. Romania, Czech Republic, Bulgaria, Hungary. These are not tiny little countries. These are legitimate nations that have an awful lot of gamers in them. So you're excluding massive slews of people. You're saying your machine's going to be region locked. We're getting the same problems that we had with games for Windows Live. This was an issue for a lot of my viewers. I'd do a video of a game, like, say, the original version of Gotham City Imposters or Section 8 Prejudice, and it would have games for Windows Live in it, and I'd have a bunch of people saying, I really want to play this game, but I can't, because games for Windows Live does not support my country. This is the same as that, only way, way worse. It's not about missing out on a couple of games, it's about missing out on the entire machine, because Xbox Live doesn't support that country. And then we have huge numbers of very small groups, yeah? We're talking about people on nuclear submarines, but that's a great example because it's not just about people on nuclear submarines, it's about a whole slew of other minority groups that are in fairly unique situations that can't use this machine and yet can use the competition. Are you out of your minds? That's what I really don't get. What are you trying to accomplish here? It's like Microsoft is going out of its way to alienate as many people as possible. I have tried to stay as balanced on this issue as I can. And I've said it, and I'll continue to say it, that regardless of all of the bad things that are occurring with the Xbox One, it does have a strong lineup of exclusives, and if it comes down to that, and it comes down to who has the better games, then Microsoft may very well win out, but it is impossible to say at this stage that the Xbox One is somehow a better value proposition for consumers than the PlayStation 4. This is mind-bogglingly stupid. I get it, okay? It's hard to distribute a machine worldwide. It's very hard. But the thing is that it's not just about that. It's not about saying, well, you'll have to wait till a little bit later for this to be launched. You can't even import the bloody thing from a country that is in the same area as you. Yeah? European Union countries. There are, of course, 27 sovereign member states in the European Union, and this machine only supports 21 countries, some of which are not part of the European Union. Let's see, shall we? Who's part of the European Union that can't gain access to this machine? That would be Bulgaria, Croatia, Cyprus, Czech Republic, Estonia, Greece, Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Malta, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Slovenia, Slovakia. You excluded half the European Union. What is wrong with you? Okay, I've calmed down. Don't worry. Anyway, let's talk about something else, shall we? So, Star Wars Battlefront was possibly the biggest surprise to a lot of people in the EA conference alongside Mirror's Edge 2. There was a brief trailer, and it was announced that Star Wars Battlefront would be in development by DICE. However, you might think this is a cause for celebration. Well, not necessarily. The initial speculation was that the game would be developed by DICE Los Angeles. I don't remember there being a DICE Los Angeles. That's because until recently there wasn't one. It used to be called Danger Close. Do you know what Danger Close developed? Yes, indeed, the blockbuster hits known as Medal of Honor and Medal of Honor Warfighter. Now, if I'm totally frank, the single player for Medal of Honor, despite having some of the lowest FOV I've ever seen, was a reasonably decent, linear, modern military shooter thrill ride. It wasn't too bad. It was okay. Now, in that case, the multiplayer was actually handled by DICE, and it wasn't too shabby. Actually, it was alright. I played quite a bit of the original Medal of Honor's multiplayer. This was, of course, at a time when Battlefield 3 wasn't out. It was reasonable, yeah? I had a fun time with it. Wasn't too bad. And then we have Medal of Honor Warfighter, which was awful. And the multiplayer was handled by Danger Close. To be fair, the multiplayer was probably the only slightly redeeming thing about that game. It was not a good game at all. The multiplayer, however, did actually have some interesting ideas. Now, I've got to say, when things are announced at E3, it's hard to know if there's a change later, whether or not the initial information was just wrong or misleading, or whether or not they changed their mind. But Patrick Soderlund of DICE fame, and also the executive VP of the EA Games label, that the actual title itself will be developed at the studio in Stockholm, as in the main studio, along with veteran Battlefield developers at the helm. In an interview with CVG, he made it abundantly clear that they really wanted to make Battlefront, and they pushed to actually have the rights to do that. He said that DICE is a very particular place, and they are very proud of what they do, and you don't really tell them what to do. I didn't anticipate them wanting to work on a license. They've always been about their own IP, but they were just like, we would kill to make this game. Well, if I'm totally honest, I can't really think of a better fit for this particular title. They have the resources, they have the experience to make something that is really immersive. I'm slightly concerned that they may reduce the feature set and take some of the stuff away, make it a little bit more serious, which I don't think they should be doing. I mean, I suppose Battlefront, if anything, was kind of just a celebration of what Star Wars is. There was a bunch of stuff that was kind of thrown in there just because it was cool. It's like, yeah, let's have lightsabers, let's have Darth Vader in it, let's do all of this other stuff. If it were turned into just what was essentially Battlefield 3 Star Wars edition, then I probably wouldn't be that enthusiastic about it. My hope is, of course, that DICE's passion for the franchise comes through, and that they're not overly restricted in what they can do. I'm definitely a bit happier knowing that the core Stockholm studio is working on this as opposed to DICE LA. Sony's been quizzed on the subject of PlayStation Plus and the new requirement to actually have PlayStation Plus if you wish to play online. Sony put out a statement on the matter, claiming that they'd already talked about the share button, sharing features, second screens, and if they wish to continue to invest into online infrastructures, well, that costs money. If they continue free service for online multiplayer, they said, from a business standpoint, there's pressure to recover costs. And that's when we decided, well, let's ask the people who are most active in playing online to share some of the costs so we can invest more. They also confirmed something else that we weren't previously aware of, the fact that you wouldn't have to pay to play the free-to-play titles available on the PlayStation 4, such as PlanetSide, Blacklight Retribution, and Warframe. Now, this is interesting, but it actually does make sense if you think about it for more than a second. The fact is that these servers, I would imagine, will be run by the companies themselves, not by Sony. Sony wouldn't really be accruing any costs. The alternative, of course, is that Sony's helping out with the server, but they're also taking a little bit of the cut of the microtransactions, so it ends up paying for it that way. However, Sony did state that some free-to-play games will not require PlayStation Plus. I would imagine those are the games which are available and hosted by other companies rather than Sony. I would think that if Sony does make a free-to-play game, and they're the guys running the servers, they will be the guys also saying, right, you need PlayStation Plus for this. Yes, you need to kind of share in the cost of this particular feature. There's a couple of things I would like to talk about in regards to this. The first thing, of course, being that yeah, PlayStation Plus is a good value proposition, you get a lot of free games with it and so on and so forth. However, will that actually keep happening? PlayStation Plus up to this point has been a value-added service, yeah? It's been something that you add on top of what you've already got, and it gives you a few pieces of functionality. Something like the auto-update system, for example, that's available, or the discounts, or the free games. Now, if it's mandatory, will we receive as many benefits? Will they continue to pump out the free titles, the big discounts, the beta access, and so on and so forth, if it's a mandatory thing? Don't know if they will, honestly. I would imagine they will probably use it to promote the Gaikai service, and I'll get onto that in a second. The second point is that I feel that PlayStation Plus is actually in place to mitigate the online pass revenue and the fact that used games are in play, right? So let's just say you buy a used game, you still have to pay to play it online. It does not cost Sony $5 a month per person to actually run that service. The bandwidth costs are a tiny fraction of that. Obviously, there's going to be some power users that cost more than others, but your average user is going to be costing Sony very, very little. So they are making a good amount of money on this. It seems to me that this service is being put in place to be a replacement, and in fact, it could very well make Sony a hell of a lot more money than online passes or any kind of used game restrictions could. I do wonder if there's any cut of PlayStation Plus being given to publishers. Probably not. I'd imagine that's just speculation, but something to bear in mind. Now, the justification, I feel it's a pretty strong one, is what I mentioned earlier, Gaikai. Yeah? I think that PlayStation Plus games will most likely be reduced in volume. I believe that simply because of what I just said, that it used to be this value-added service, now it's a requirement, so you don't necessarily need to incentivize it in the same way. Plus, the whole thing would actually cost them more, because PlayStation Plus is going to have a hell of a lot more members than it currently does now, because it will be mandated and not really optional. Now, the Gaikai thing, there's two sides to this. I believe that Gaikai games will most likely be something that's included. The notion that you could play a PlayStation 2 game or a PlayStation 3 game, and that'll kind of be your free game of the month, because you can then use the PlayStation Plus service to advertise Gaikai as an idea. You know, you're talking about a cloud gaming service and trying to get people into the idea that you are sort of streaming a game over the internet, right? And I like the Gaikai service as an alternative to the backless compatibility, but it's definitely not as good. And it will most likely involve people rebuying the same games over and over again. We don't know if there'll be some kind of rental plan. That would be kind of cool, but that would be a second subscription on top of what you've already got. I mean, the Gaikai stuff is actually not so much shrouded in mystery, but it's not something they've really chosen to actually expand upon, and they barely mentioned it during the E3 conference. The second thing is that Gaikai obviously costs a lot of money. This kind of cloud streaming service and the idea that you have to build the infrastructure to make it work properly is costly, and I'd imagine that this PlayStation Plus thing is also paying for that. So, they are offering more services, yeah? Can they justify the cost? Yes. As a PC gamer, it's kind of abhorrent to me to even think about paying for online service, but frankly, on a console, that seems to be the way of things, and $5 a month is not that much. I've already paid for PlayStation Plus for the last 2 years anyway, so for me, it's not a change whatsoever, but I can definitely see it upsetting a few people. We will see when it comes out as to what happens to it, whether or not it will become Xbox Live-like in the sense that it'll be less about the added value and more about just a simple arbitrary requirement, or whether they'll be able to maintain that level of quality and that level of free stuff that they used to give with PlayStation Plus. And finally, there's not exactly been a lot of news on the PC front from E3, but then again, there barely ever is. However, in an interview with The Verge, Nvidia's senior vice president Tony Tomasi stated that, "I'm glad the new consoles are here, if for no other reason than to actually raise the bar. It's nothing but goodness for PC," he says. "The PC will keep growing, but the consoles will give us that next bump. Developers can now build really awesome content that can then scale to the PC. To us, the consoles are great because they catch up from a features perspective." Interesting statement to make, of course. Nvidia actually isn't really involved in the console generation because both the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One use an AMD APU as opposed to Nvidia technology. We should also note, of course, that Nvidia is trying to move into the handheld space with the Nvidia Shield, which is direct competition to the PlayStation Vita. Now, of course, you could argue, as the article adequately points out, that because they're being completely and totally shut out of this generation, that they're sort of looking for the upside. Even the Wii U doesn't use Nvidia graphics technology, so they've been basically shut out of an entire console generation. Yeah, that's gonna sting. That leaves Nvidia with the PC market, which is growing, certainly. You know, it's doing pretty well. Is it the biggest market, though, at least for the high-end stuff? Not necessarily. You know, core games generally don't sell as much on the PC as they do on the consoles. That's just the reality of the situation. There's a couple of notable exceptions, but not all of that many. We're also talking about a company that's trying to sell $1,000 graphics cards. Yeah, the Nvidia Titan, of course. If you buy a Titan, by the way, and don't buy a 780 instead, which is almost half the price, then you're kind of out of your mind, unless you're buying the Titan for a very specific purpose. But anyway, that's kind of beside the point. So they're put in a pretty awkward position there, quite frankly, and that also gives AMD an awful lot of clout and most likely an awful lot of money going forward, the ability to compete on a level that they weren't necessarily able to do before. That's actually good news for gamers. Probably bad news for Nvidia, they have to step their game up, but it's good news for gamers. Now, does this help? It kind of does, to some degree, although I would also argue that it doesn't. The reason I argue that is because there's been, for the past couple of years, such a massive difference between PC performance and the console performance that we have been getting some special attention. Big high-res texture packs, some pretty cool technology, and of course the obvious PR of look at how cool this looks on PC. Now, stuff like Infamous, for instance, looks incredible, yeah? That looks like a top-end PC game, at least based on the footage that I've currently seen. Great lighting effects, a new level of realism in there, great physics in there as well. That's the kind of thing that I would like to see more of on PC. I'm hoping that this does push things forward. I really, really do. Unfortunately, the other way of looking at it is, well, the PC market is even less important now because you can get PC-like graphics. Yeah, they're not as good, but, like, it's a fraction of the cost. So why would you even concern yourself with a gaming PC when the PlayStation 4 is good enough? It's a $400 box. Now, up to this point, we can say, yeah, you can build a PC for $400 or $500 that will kick the ass of an Xbox, for instance. Yeah, and it could. Kick the ass of a PlayStation 4? Not necessarily. The good side of it is that because the architecture of the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One compared to a PC is much more similar than it used to be, because they both now use this x86 architecture, even though it's an APU as opposed to a CPU and GPU combo, that porting should in theory be easier, and porting well should in theory be easier. That should mean that hopefully we get more ports, quicker ports, and better quality ports. But it does still come down to things like commercial reasons, not wanting to release on PC, and whether or not they'll even take the time to make the PC versions good. So there's cautious optimism to be had, but I don't think it's all good news for PC gaming. We will see how it pans out, of course, over the next couple of years. Alright folks, that's me done for the day. Thank you very much for watching the content patch. Before I go, I'd like to give you the OC Remix track of the day. Streets of Sodding Rage. Oh yes. Oh yes. What a great soundtrack. I mean, a soundtrack that actually holds up to this very day, which is what really surprises me more so than anything else. It's a soundtrack that you can listen to right now and it'll still be good. The original composer was Motohiro Kawashima and Yuzo Koshiro. Like, these guys know what they're doing. There are so many good remixes. This one is pretty old school, from 2002, but it's certainly one of my favorites. It's from Streets of Rage 2. The song is called Underlogic. The remix is called Sid of Rage. Nice and bleepy. Very much so. Like it a lot. So here you go. Sid of Rage, ladies and gentlemen. I'll see you next time.